Hello, everyone. I'm Deep Dhillon, your host, and welcome to your AI injection. Joining us today is Oded Cohen, a seasoned tech leader with over 15 years of experience building high-scale internet systems and implementing advanced analytics solutions. Oded is the VP of Engineering at Viz.ai, a company using AI to accelerate disease detection, streamline care coordination, and optimize treatment pathways in hospitals. Oded, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So maybe start us off by telling us, what problem are you guys trying to solve at Viz.ai? What exists without your solution or kind of before your solution came on the market? What's the typical scenario? And then how is that different with your solution kind of in place?
So Viz started using AI to solve use cases where time is of the essence. So it started with use cases of stroke, where really every minute counts. So if you are able to properly detect and treat a stroke patient, the sooner the better. Really every minute kills millions of neurons in your brain. And this is something one of the co-founder somewhat experienced in his life. And that's really how he came with that idea. And really the problem before Viz is that if you come to a hospital to be treated and they suspect you have a stroke, they're going to have to go through a series of tests. In this process takes time, sometimes takes a few hours, and different people are involved in it. And it's a very waterfall kind of a process, right? So each step has to happen, and then the next step starts. And it involves humans detecting the actual condition in the stroke. And the realization was that we can use really AI to detect the condition, right? The type of stroke that you might have. And so it really accelerates the detection phase, right? Instead of waiting for a human that might be occupied with something else at the moment. Two, which is not necessarily AI, but the engineering part is once you've detected it, really surface all that information to the entire team all at once, right? We have mobile phones. So you might have a situation where the relevant people are not present near the area where the scan was done. Okay, maybe they need to call somebody from the house. But with the phones, you actually can be alerted right away. You can actually see the actual scan. You can communicate kind of like a WhatsApp between the team. You can call people directly from the house, and you can make decisions while you're on the way to hospital, for example, right? To prepare the patient already.
I was just going to ask, so you have a patient in their house having a stroke.
No. Okay, sorry. The physician might be in the house, or the surgeon might be in the house right now.
Okay, so the patient's in the hospital, and you've already got image. You already have imagery of the what are you working with? Imagery.
Right. So in this use case, the imagery is automatically sent to the cloud, to the Viz platform. Then all relevant algos are running on it to detect different conditions. And assuming it detects something, it can alert either prioritize it to be looked at first compared to other things. Or also at the same time, all the team that's supposed to take care of that patient get alerts right away and can see the actual scan and where the condition that was detected is, and can already communicate through this. If the patient needs to be sent to a different hospital, that hospital might actually be on that team, so they can already see that information and they can already prepare things. So really, it's not just AI, it's the entire, technology that you can leverage, right? The fact you have cloud, you have mobile phones, you can notify people. And so it's not just AI, it's a full platform that is doing that. Now,
just for a second, I like to really understand the whole patient. Patient is at home, has a stroke. Patient somehow gets to the hospital. Somehow at the patient during the normal triage process, they figure out patient has a stroke. Then they send them for an MRI or a CT scan?
A CT, in the US, it's usually a CT scan.
Okay, so then they get their CT scan. Now that image goes up and gets accessed somehow to this system, but in parallel, is the radiologist involved? Okay, so so the radiologist is also looking at the scan, and maybe they take a little bit longer to get it physically in front of the scan. The machines are doing their thing, and then the radiologist is approving the output or being informed by the model.
There's a few ways to look at it. One is we can prioritize the work of the radiologist and basically say, hey, in the list of 20 things that you have to look at, here's an urgent case that the AI already detected that is suspected stroke, right? And so you can look at it earlier, so you can save some time there. But two, you don't really have to wait for the radiologist to say there's a stroke. You can, at this point where the eye is already detected, and it depends on how the hospital wants to manage it, you can already send the alert to the stroke team and say, hey, we've detected this type of stroke, and they can already see it and communicate and already start the process instead of a waterfall process where you have to wait for the radiologist. You can already do some of the preparation. You won't operate and do something before the radiologists have it say, but you can already do certain preparation before and you can save time. And we typically talk about saving 40 minutes, an hour, which is a long time in those type of conditions.
Okay, so two things you said are interesting. I mean, everything you're saying is interesting, but two things stood out to me. One is your system is operating against the queue of information that the radiology team is sort of looking at. So they have a bunch of things they could be looking at, and one of the things that the system can do is just elevate the priority of something. Is that right?
So technically, the way it works is it's two parallel systems, right? So a scan is done, and then the same scan is sent both to the radiology system and to the Viz platform. So they operate completely independent theoretically, right? However, if we detect a certain condition, we can notify, there's an integration to notify basically the system of the radiologist to send back some information to that system so they can also see what the AI was already detecting. It's running in parallel. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is the people that are the clinical team that needs to react to this, assuming there is a stroke and a certain condition, they can already be notified right away at that point in time, right? There's very high likelihood that the AI, what it detect was correct. And so you can already do some of the preparation and you can already look at the data through your phone, wherever you are, and kind of give an initial guidance to the team what needs to be prepared while the radiologists do a more detailed analysis and verify things, right? And so this process really saves a lot of time and really gets, significant better results.
So if the system is experiencing a precision error or a perceived precision error, can any of those other humans in the loop nix the AI?
Right. So there's two options, right? Two errors, right? False positive, false negative. Sure. If it said there's something here and radiologists look at it and decide it's not, or the team that is actually already being alerted, the specialist is looking at it and decides this is probably not the case, then okay, it was a false alarm. It can happen. Another option, if you missed it, radiologists will still go over the list regardless, right? So it doesn't replace the existing system, it just makes it more efficient.
That makes a lot of sense, right? Like in healthcare, there's a ton of concern about, machines dominating the situation. And I don't think it's just usually not allowed by, in the health system for that to be the case, right? Everything has to be physician orchestrated.
So everything we do goes through all the algorithm, everything gets FDA approved, right? And it gets through all the regulation. I think what helps adopt those things is that, again, it does not replace the human decision, right? Nobody will make a decision based on just AI, okay? But it really helps things become more efficient. And by the way, it sometimes you can find things that human miss, which happens. I'll give you an example, an interesting case that we had. A guy in his 50s complains about a headache, goes to his primary care physician. You know how it is. They don't know yet what it is. There's some back and forth that lasts a few days. Eventually, they decide to send him to a CT scan, right? They don't suspect there's a stroke. They just don't know yet what it is. Maybe it's, God forbid, cancer, right? There's so many options here.
Or just a headache, you never know.
Right. So he goes, he does the CT, and they send him home and say, come back, or we'll call you in 2 weeks once we have results, right? Because it goes into a queue, and it's not a top priority. And so he goes home, he's supposed to wait for 14 days. Luckily, our system was installed there. So for our system, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
It
it's
got
going
the
to hit it right
scan,
away.
it ran all the algorithm. One of the algorithms that found that it had a brain hemorrhage. I believe he left the hospital, got a call, like he was literally a few minutes away from the hospital. He gets a call from because the physician automatically gets an alert and say, hey, right, typically it will go into some queue of somewhere, and in a week, somebody will go over it. Gets an alert, hey, there's something here. He looks at it, verifies this is indeed the case, right? Calls him. And again, he was just a few minutes away from the hospital. Says, I'm sorry to tell you, but you have to come right away. We find that you have a brain hemorrhage. He comes, they go through the entire process. I think the next day he got treated and he's back. No side effect, no nothing, right? Now, it might have happened that maybe 10 days later, they find that there was the hemorrhage, they call him and everything is fine. But at the same time, it might have caused permanent damage because, it kept growing and eventually it starts damaging the brain. He might collapse or those things.
I mean, that's
right?
a great case, right? Because you have a fixed resource, which is the radiologists and their ability to look at scans. And there's sort of an inherent prioritization that happens due to sometimes overly high level variables, right? But they have to kind of prioritize their queue. It's not that they're bad people. They're just, there's only so many of them. Radiologists aren't cheap. I think they're like almost $1 million a year for a radiologist. It's incredible. But meanwhile, the machine is relatively cheap, and can just run right away. And it can take in so much more information than whatever was used to define that queue for the radiologist. So that seems like a pretty awesome case.
Yeah. There's also another case where, and we're going into areas that are not necessarily acute cases, but are still interesting. So a guy gets to a hospital, they do an ECG, right? An ECG you can get for various reasons, right? Our system gets the ECG and detects that there is some relatively rare condition in the heart, rare defect in the heart. And he didn't come for that. Like it was just the algo ran and found it. I think they were able to not only identify confirm this is the case. One of the challenges we saw is you go to a hospital, you do a few tests, whatever, they send you home. Let's say they find something. Now the guy might be 2 hours away. You have to reschedule everything. This can take weeks. Like the entire process is long and painful. Sometimes the guy will just say, like, people are just, procrastinating on things. Like they don't handle it. So the fact that we were able to detect it right away while he was in the hospital, they put him on they sent him to an echo scan, okay? Because the only way to fully validate the condition was echo. And they confirmed that was the case. And then now can start the process. So we might have saved him months, if not years, of being undetected. And this is a condition that might cause you to have eventually a heart attack and die. It's even when you're young.
Well, this is an interesting case from an efficiency. I think you're making in part efficiency argument. So you're saving the time of the patient and the mental share to have to kind of reschedule and all of that. But you're also saving the hospital staff time, whatever is involved in the rescheduling. And then you potentially have the ability to just kind of act right then and there, in addition to the direct health benefits, which, early detection, of course, is a big deal. So
yeah, I'll give you more cases. One of the challenges hospitals have or physicians have is there's a lot of information that you have to sift through, and you have to go to a system that has all that information, and some of the information is in one place, and the other in another place. It's not always organized in the way that you want it. Let's say we've detected already a certain condition or suspicion for that. We can pull data from other systems. AI is used here actually because some of that data is non-structured data, textual data, that like it's not as easy to find whether a patient is getting a specific, let's say, is on a beta blockers, right? You have to, sometimes it's in a more structured way, sometimes it's written in some text somewhere. And so sometimes you need AI module to actually extract that information. And so what we can do is we can say, okay, here's the condition. We're not only going to alert you on that, we're also going to bring you all the relevant information from other system, including things that might be hiding in textual form, and present you with that So now you have a full picture to make the decision, right? You have the complete information to make the decision. And so there's a lot of different things. At the end of the day, you were saying something about like the sensitivity in healthcare, and like you can't, like the goal here is not to replace humans, right? The goal is to make them more efficient, to allow them to treat more patients, to prevent us from missing patients, right? It's still, humans still needs to be involved, right? You still need the specialists and all those, but they can just do a lot more.
Have data, have a hypothesis on some high-value insights that, if extracted automatically, could transform your business. Not sure how to proceed? Bounce your ideas off one of our data scientists with a free consult. Reach out at xionics.com. You'll talk to an expert, not a salesperson. So it sounds like you're plugged directly into like the hospital's Epic systems, and you're able to get right at diagnostic data in addition to like the doctor's notes and all of the scripts. Basically, like everything that happens for a patient in the hospital ultimately winds up in their Epic system. Is that right? Like, are you kind of making the case when you sell to a hospital, like, hey, we're going to tap right into Epic. We're obviously HIPAA compliant, but we're going to pull that out, and we have these conditions that we can alert and bring efficiencies on today, but over time, we're going to continue to learn and operate on additional ones. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So we do integrate with, the hospital information system, Epic or others. Epic is the dominant one. And that's part of the input that we get. Ideally, we get imaging, we get ECG, we get echo, we get EHR information. So we are slowly expanding into more and more areas that allows us really to solve a lot of different problems. And when we solve it, also to give you the full picture of condition of the patient.
What would be helpful is like, why don't we take one condition and walk us through the model construction process? So let's go back. Maybe it's a new one. Maybe it's one of the original ones. What did you get on day one? Because you get plugged into the hospital patient data management system. Now what? Like, are you where are you getting training for data from? How are you integrated in that training data collection process into whatever the radiologists see or whatever the cardiologists see? Like, and then how much of that is like your own behind the scenes? You guys are going out and like, bringing in physicians or human proxies for physicians to like label. Like, walk us through that whole process. Like, how does it work from a new condition till model release and then model refinement?
So let's talk about imaging for a second, right? As an example. So in order to develop a new algo, we need data, right? That's the reality. And so typically you can buy data. That's the best use case is or the most common use case is to buy the data. We do have a team of clinicians that are able to label the data, so we can create the necessary data set to build the algo. And there's different things that you need to think about: the diversity of the population, male, female, all sorts of things that are required. Obviously, the size of the samples, it depends on how rare the disease is, how frequent you can find the data. So you have to prepare the data. In a lot of the cases, we'll buy the initial data. We can classify, we can tag it ourselves, and then we can train our algos ourselves. Obviously, there's a process to submit the algo to get an FDA approval. We can run it in the background in a hospital to verify before it is actually live. So to verify certain things before, right? To look at the data, to verify that it actually does what we expect before we open it to be officially used within the hospital or in general. And then we keep on monitoring the data to ensure things change, things evolve, scanners change. We might have not addressed certain condition where maybe people have already had a surgery in their brain that we didn't account for. And then as we see real data and we can see maybe the outcome is not as good as we expect in certain cases, then we can further adjust and improve things. So the algorithm doesn't learn by itself, right? This is a common question we get. It's not a self-learning algorithm that based on the data that it gets, it's slowly learning and adjusting.
It's a very controlled process, I assume. Your data scientists have the data, have labeled data. They run
It's a fixed algo, right?
Yeah. And then at that point, it's snapshotted by the FDA, like cannot change.
Right,
And
but
probably the FDA is snapshotting the entire process for algorithm for new model releases too, I would imagine.
it's a bit different. Like to make update, it depends on what type of updates are made and exactly what is needed to be submitted. But it's a lot small, like a lot shorter and simpler process to further update and improve things. So yeah, this is more or less the process.
To what extent are your models operating only on the sort of, for lack of a better word, like the lab result of that you're focused on? So, for example, to what extent is it determining the stroke based only on the radiological imagery versus also incorporating other variables about the patient, their, maybe their lifestyle history, lab history, all that?
So what I would say is some of the challenges that it's a regulatory issue as well. And so a lot of the algos are focusing on detecting, let's say in the case of imaging, the imaging. We might supplement it with more information that we think are relevant so that it can give a broader context. But today, it's not, I don't think that we don't have a combination of an old radiology report and a new scan. And then because of those two together, we can detect something otherwise we couldn't detect. There are cases where there's additional information that is somewhat like a supplementary algorithm that gives you not just the condition, but also give you measurements around certain parameters. And this also requires AI, like the size of the bleed, right? And the volume of it and all sorts of things. And so, but it's a separate algo that runs in parallel. And then you get the information. You can see both of those things. For various reasons, trying to do those together is less practical or more challenging in terms of getting that to be approved.
To what extent are your physicians interested in explainability? Are you working on explaining why you think, why the model thinks a particular thing? And if so, maybe walk us through some of the challenges there.
So I think the second algo that brings you some of the measurements helps with some of that. There are some regulatory aspects of being able to provide the explanatory nature of why it thought that there is that condition. So typically it's not in the main algo.
I see.
And
so
by the way,
it's regulated separately, like the description. I mean, they're separate things. Like if you conclude that it has this disease, this is why you might conclude that, which is different from saying, I concluded this and this is why I concluded it.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that we would like to be able to do, but I think it's too complicated to get approval for, costs a lot of money. And so we're basically trying to, eventually there's an ROI, right? Like if it costs too much, you might not be able to do it. So you're providing enough value and enough information so that going to provide the ROI also obviously for the hospital, for the physicians. It's not like in a non-regulated environment, it would be a lot easier, obviously, then they'll be able to actually do probably more.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, few environments need regulation more than this one. I mean, this is probably
I think
important stuff that happens with machines. So
I agree.
So tell me a little bit about that, because it feels like you guys to get where you've gotten, you have to be at the forefront of FDA approval for AI algorithms. Maybe like rewind a few years, because they were pretty hesitant to like take this step forward and allow this level of intimacy with the physician, that Viz.ai is sort of experiencing. Walk us through, where are they in terms of their thinking now, and what did it take to get them there? And these models are not as straightforward as prior diagnostic descriptions were to like communicate how they work. Is it all of the reliance still on, efficacy data in trials and kind of describing that ground truth collection process and addressing the things that we would think of as machine learning problems? Or are there some sort of unique things that the FDA kind of thinks about that we might not guess?
So I don't know exactly what was, Viz exists for 8 years now. I'm sure it was hard at the beginning, right? I know that in the initial phase, we submitted something for approval, got rejected. And like they were trying to figure out how to do it, right? How to convince the FDA that this is, it's worth pursuing. And there was a lot of novelty approvals where it's like first time. Nowadays, I think it's not like it's a lot more common than people think. I don't think we get rejected. We get like maybe feedback but we understand what they're looking for. And to be honest, I'm not the one that is, highly involved in all this process, but the team is well familiar with what the FDA needs in order to feel comfortable with those things. Nowadays, approving, it's still a long process, still costs money. We're talking about a few months, but it's not where it was before. There's actually a case where I think it's called NTAP. I forgot what it stands for, but really the federal government, I don't know what I'm not sure 100% what agency it is, but basically nowadays they pay a hospital to use those type of platforms or to use algorithm to detect, right? Like LVO, like the common stroke that we're one of the main algorithms that we use, the hospital get paid for every time our platform is running on a scan. And the reason is what they realize is that it's actually saving everybody's money. Like it saves the insurance money eventually, right? Because if you're treating the patient faster, if the outcome is better, if they need to spend less time in the hospital and the recovery after that is better, it's not a win-win-win situation where we win, the hospital win, and the patient win. It actually also, whoever is to pay the bill wins as well. And so,
who is they in this case? This is
yeah, probably one of the federal insurance, like the Medicare, Medicaid. I never know what the. Actually lived in the US for 10 years, but I still don't know the difference.
Well, I don't think those of us who spent our whole life there know how it works. Even those of us who spent a long time studying the healthcare system.
Right. And so the hospital get refunded on those things. And they're doing it in a way where like it's not whether there's a detection or not, but every time there's a scan to prevent biases, right? So there's no incentive here. And so I think hey, we're not sure whether we need AI or whether it's okay we're actually going to pay you, incentivize you to adopt it. It's a long way, right? It's very different.
Yeah, I mean, that's because, any of us who work with these kinds of models and this data know we can outperform physicians. So I remember the first time I was working with a startup. This was a number of years ago. It was a cardiologist founded company that it was like an iPhone case for heartbeat anomaly detection. So the idea is, physician pops it on, they get some really quick early feedback before basically an improvement over the stethoscope. And the first time I sat down to build these models, to put something in place, I think it took me like a day or something. And I was outperforming all my training data already. I was like, what? This can't be right. This has got to be wrong. So yeah, the algorithms are just so powerful now, right? And they're so good at pattern detection.
Have a ton of data, don't know where to start? Chat with one of our principal data scientists at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. You'll talk to an expert, not a salesperson.
That kind of brings me to a slightly related topic. So most of what Viz.ai, at least it sounds like you're doing, is interacting with, let's call it highly vetted diagnostic data that's all gone through really kind of rigorous approvals, or it wouldn't be sitting in an Epic system in a hospital somewhere. But there's also this movement of kind of remote sensing stuff that patients can have in their houses. Like the system we were working with, one of the things that we had to do is we had to gather training data, but in very noisy environments, because you're not sitting in a perfectly clean anechoic chamber getting pristine, audio data of a heartbeat. We had a physician sitting, in the third world with rickshaw horns going off constantly. So I'm curious, what do you think is the role of that kind of remote sensing information in this, with respect to kind of AI and diagnostic data gathering? And how does that maybe play with this, now you're checked into the hospital situation? Because if I go back to that stroke example that you first gave, what I would really want is, and I don't actually know what signals stroke gives off, but I'm guessing there might be something in the dilation of the eyes. Maybe so ideally, you would have detected the stroke well before you set foot in the hospital, and you could maybe trigger your whole system from that. Do you guys think about that at all, like the remote diagnostic issue? And
so first, let me address the question about like the point about the noisy data. Even in the hospital, there's a lot of noise.
Oh yeah.
Right? Patient move and like there's all sorts of condition and the scans are different. So we've seen cases where, because we also integrate third-party algorithms to our platform. And so we saw cases where in theory it should have worked, but when you look at the real life data, the performance dropped dramatically, and then you need to help improve those things. So noise exists. With regards to that, there is you're right that actually I'm not familiar with the stats, but I know a lot of patients are just not coming fast enough. And so you lose also time in the home, right? Because people don't know about that this is like something, right? I don't know all the things, but I know like if you might get like a part of your body a bit kind of maybe a part of your brain, because in some of those strokes, half part of your brain is not getting blood. And so in that case, the other side of your body is going to be kind of something is going to be off. You might be a bit confused, mumbling. And again, I'm not a physician, so I'm not from that space, but so I'm sure there is a way to solve this problem. We're not there. We're very B2B on the hospital side. We're not going all the way to the end consumer. There is another step on the way, because when you're in emergency care ambulance, I don't know if you got that, right? You can actually help there as well. There's things where you can send some of that information and get it to the hospital and go through this process. There's things like crazy where, hey, you might need to route him to the right hospital because others have too many patients to like there's different things that you can do on the route to the hospital as well, right? Bring the data faster, route them to the right hospital. And you're basically taking the further down the road, right? Like just figure out whether you have something. And so at least for us, the second part might be relevant, at some point. We do have integration with some players around that, but we have our hands full with other things before
I
we can get into
imagine.
that.
Yeah, I mean, you have a virtually unlimited set of conditions. I mean, it's I don't know, 5,000 or something conditions to go after, with the data set you're sitting on. One thing you said is really interesting to me. So you're integrating third-party algorithms, and that seems like you're kind of in this beautiful position. Once you're in these hospitals, you've got the data. You have the ability to facilitate the execution of new experimentation, that you could even put in a framework in place to like facilitate the gathering of efficacy data to go to the FDA. And you could go really far with this idea of how do you guys think about that? Like, are you at the point where you're thinking, hey, we actually want to build an ecosystem of smaller teams who, frankly, given where you're at, it probably doesn't even matter as much to you that they're your algorithms being executed or somebody else's, because the business problem is really getting in these hospitals and impacting patient outcomes. So how do you think about, like, how advanced are you today, and where are you guys trying to get to there? Because I could imagine a world where you're really like, hey, let's have the world's best data scientists able to spend their cycles grabbing data, building better models, and in improving results.
So what I would say is good algorithm is not enough, right? Like, because you really have to be able to deploy it into the hospitals and incorporate it into the workflow of the hospital.
Yeah.
And so they might want to still work with their own system. So for example, when we were talking about radiologists, is like, I don't want a different platform. I have my own platform. Bring the AI into my platform, right? That one option.
Yeah.
Or enhance it in a way where I don't need to learn a different system. And on the other hand, some physicians are like, hey, yeah, this is nice. Like that we can have our own kind of at the palm of our hands, something that we can use to operate, and we can kind of have a clinical workflow that we can manage very easily through this. So the idea is, yes, like we can't do, like, developing an algorithm is costly, time consuming. We understand we can't do all of those things. And sometimes there's already good algorithms out there, right? And so why would we now spend a year and a half with a lot of money to do that? We can partner with the company and say, look, we can, assuming there's a need, like, because there's use cases where, okay, just the algo itself is fine, right, for helping radiologists. But there's cases where you want to improve the entire workflow, and an algo is just one part of it.
Yeah.
In that case, again, we're not just solving for the algo. We're also streamlining the entire process, right? Because we can, as I said, we can activate a team. So you can you get notification, you look at the data, you can activate a team, put them in. And so the idea is that, again, where there's no algo and we have an interesting opportunity that can, help the hospital, there's a business case for this, then we will invest. But if there's already an algo there that a company is willing to partner, I think that's a win-win situation, right? We can get things faster to market.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. When I put my venture capital hat on, it's like you guys are a platform play, right?
Exactly.
Like you don't need to own and dominate every single algorithm at this point. The moat around the business is just the sheer difficulty in getting inside of these hospitals in the first place. Kudos to you and your team. Like that's super not easy. It's really hard. As somebody who's tried and failed at it a few times, like it's tough. And so it speaks to the power and potential of these models to really make a huge impact on care. That's a big deal. So how many hospitals are you guys in now?
We're in over 1,400 hospitals, and mostly in the US, some in Europe, although the focus is the US.
Yeah, that's okay. So then you're quite mature, and so this stuff is affecting millions of people every day.
I think we touch a patient every few seconds, like a new patient.
So all those hospitals must be in various. So maybe one thing that would be valuable is like, what are the differences in implementation across hospitals? Because I'm guessing that hospitals have different ideas of how to integrate and like how to elevate information. Maybe like, what do you give them? Are you giving them like precision and recall thresholds at which they alerts are sent, who they're sent to? It seems like there's a bunch of heuristics there that maybe you offer as configuration to each hospital. Is that
right? So first of all, we have a collection of products, algorithms, workflows. We have clinical workflows that might not have an algorithm, but they still are valuable just because we have the tools to make the data available for you more easily, more accessibly, and communicate in the platform. So first of all, as a hospital, Viz started as a stroke play, right? So it wasn't like a platform. It was solution for stroke, specifically at the beginning for a specific condition in stroke, specific stroke. And so it evolved over time to be more of a platform play, right? That's where we are now. And it's still evolving. It's not done yet. We still have a long way to go. We're still not in all the clinical domains. And it takes time, like to go into new domains, right? Into cardiology and oncology and all, like there's a lot of things. It requires an understanding. It's not just a technological challenge. It's a business challenge and a clinical challenge. Understanding where the problems are. Maybe they already have solutions and there's no point for us to be there. And so a hospital might buy different portions of our solution. There are some level of configurations around how do you want to get alerted and who's going to get alerted, and whether you want a small team at the beginning and then have an activation team where like maybe there's one or two people that gets the initial alert and then they in charge of activating the full team. And so there's this variety of things. And to be honest, this is something part of our evolution to add more capabilities and be able to do more of those customizations so hospital can, adjust things to what they need. So this is where we are.
That's awesome. I mean, it's
not necessarily AI, right?
Yeah, I know. I get it.
It's like a SaaS product.
I mean, it sounds like you're almost focusing on the individual departments within the hospital, like an oncology solution, a neurology solution. Is that fair to say?
The idea is that there is some platform capabilities that are shared, but there is in each area, even within that, there's subspecialties that have like each medical condition might have a specific need and a workflow. You might actually be transferred. We have conditions where after you had a stroke, you might need to be referred to a cardiologist because it might be that the problem starts from the heart. And within that, there are different, subspecialties. So it's not like a general solution that fits all, right? Again, there is a layer that is common, but you have to address certain things that are different for different clinical domain. Also, in terms of the data, like ECG is relevant for cardiologists. It's not relevant for other areas. Echo It's the heart. Like there's different things that are not the same, right? So you have to be able to support them, different modality, as we call them, right? And so there's an evolution and more capabilities so we can actually support more and more of those domains.
This has been a super helpful conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I have maybe one final question. Like if we think out, 5 or even 10 years into the future, in the realm of healthcare with all, the diseases and stuff that we've mentioned and the rise of AI and the increasingly powerful algorithms and even the non-algorithms, the workflow, like what do you see as being the patient experience? Let's just go 10 years out because it's more fun. So 10 years out, how is the world different from a patient's vantage with AI bringing, these benefits to the care
So
experience?
I'll give you a personal story. Like
my father was those ones are the most fun.
My father was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. It reemerged again, and then he was on a monitoring.
Yeah.
And so every 6 months he gets a PET CT scan. And then recently it reemerged again, but we found out, and it was relatively big. We found out that 6 months ago when he did the test, it was already there and it wasn't detected because humans, right? It happens. I mean, that's reality, right? Now, the challenge is now, even after you get detected, they need to give you all sorts of scans and tests and all those things. And from what I understand is like it can take weeks, it can take sometimes months, right? Like the accessibility of that is, and the reason is it's usually a lot of the time it's people. You just don't have enough technicians to do this, and so my hope is that 10 years from now, again, we have less of those cases that are being missed. And then the ability to handle more patients so you don't have to wait for so long to actually get the treatment has improved significantly. And then even when you're within the process, again, it's not necessarily AI, but the workflow, everything is more efficient. So you're basically more likely to get detected and not missed. If you are detected, you're going to get treated. You get the right treatment. By the way, we didn't even cover that. Like the fact that there's always new treatment coming in, and like we can help surface, hey, there's a new treatment that might be relevant.
Yeah.
Right. So we can,
or even like even servicing clinical trials that somebody,
we actually do that. Like we identify today patients and surfacing them as potentially for like a candidate for a clinical trial. And instead of having to go,
that's such a big deal because it's so hard for, so many people are sitting. I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking. It's particularly in cancer because there's such amazing treatments that are just right on the horizon. And there's people who are looking at a terminal case. Somebody's got to get better at like matching them up with, clinical trials.
So there's twofold. One, for the people that are getting into the clinical trial, it might be a life-saving.
Yeah.
Which is important. But it's furthermore, the clinical trial itself takes so long because you have to.
If you can shrink that time.
So if you could, right. So instead of 3 years, it's 2 years or whatever. You got a new drug to market faster. So our mission is, to get more patients treated, to get to the right treatment, to life-saving treatment, right? And so do I think it's going to be perfect in 10 years? It's probably not, but hopefully it's going to be a lot better.
I'll just add a little bit, because I have my 10-year out vision too. I think everything you said is right on. I'll just add that I think getting more early indicator device, info off of devices, whether that's the evolution of the smartwatch over time, or whether it's like handheld diagnostics that are just really low cost that can be sitting in the house, or even if they're just sent home by the hospital for patients that they're kind of concerned about. I just think that realm is going to get so much better at early, and we're going to get so much earlier at indication. And then I also just think like when you look at like impact of something like, the new GPT LLM models, the rate at which they're accelerating research, researchers are able to know what to work on so much better through like, PubMed analysis, like looking through the literature so much more efficiently, all the way down to just, overall the impact is, I just think it seems inevitable that humans are just going to start living longer. And we're just going to get better at treating, and
There's
hopefully we're
more,
improving life quality as a function of age as well.
right? I think there's, I mean, I kind of focus on where we operate in, but
Absolutely.
I was talking to a guy that was telling me about how they can find new drugs much more efficiently and quickly just because of the ability to process data and with genetics and better match and all those things, like more precise medication. And so those things without machines, like it's going to be impossible.
That's all for this episode. I'm Deep Dhillon, your host, saying check back soon for your next AI injection. In the meantime, if you need help injecting AI into your business or project, reach out to us at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. Whether it's text, audio, video, or other business data, we help all kinds of organizations like yours automatically find and operationalize transformative insights.